Get back! It's unstable! Let me go! We're evacuating the area now.
At first, I honestly thought it was just a typical summer blackout. You know, the kind where the utility company promises to fix it shortly. But then my whole body went cold because the silence was too deep. My son Leo's white noise machine died. The ceiling fan above the kitchen sparked like a cheap firework. And then, the worst part, a smell of scorched earth started wafting in from the backyard. That's when the new HOA, they somehow looked straight at me and blamed me. Look, I'm Mark Dalton, I'm 58, and I'm a retired master electrician from the Navy Seabees. My entire career was spent building, repairing, and protecting critical infrastructure. I know intentional damage when I see it. This wasn't a malfunction. It felt surgical, a deliberate cut. So, I grabbed my voltage tester and my worn-out work boots, and I followed the wires, tracing the path right out of my yard, across the property line. And what I uncovered next, well, it led to a sight I never thought I'd see in our perfect little community: Havenwood Trails, a federal raid, sirens, suits, and handcuffs. They didn't know who they were messing with, not even a little. It all started on a humid Tuesday evening. 1 second I was watching the digital clock on the oven count down for Leo's pizza rolls, and the next, everything just vanished. Complete and utter darkness. It was the kind of unnatural silence that screams something is wrong. I stepped outside onto my porch. The air was thick, heavy, and the streetlights on my side of Silver Birch Lane? Gone. Every single one. But across the street, the lights were blazing. The Bennetts, the Wilsons, their porch lights were glowing that smug, steady yellow. It was a perfectly targeted blackout, affecting only the houses on my side of the lane. My neighbor, Maria, poked her head out, phone flashlight waving like a beacon. "You too, Mark?" My router's fried. She looked frantic. The HOA app just says system maintenance required, but why only us? The Wilsons are having a pool party, for heaven's sake. I narrowed my eyes, the CB instinct kicking in hard. This wasn't random. I walked the perimeter of my yard. No tripped breaker, no storm damage, nothing obvious. But then, near the rear fence, right where the city's utility easement begins, I saw it, a fresh trench. The soil was damp, black, recently disturbed, and it ran right along my property line, connecting to Maria's place, and then curving sharply toward the community lodge, the trailhead. I messaged my buddy, Darren, who runs a utility logistics firm now. I sent him photos of the trench, asking if he knew of any authorized work. He called me back in 5 minutes flat. "Mark, that line shouldn't be there. If they tapped into the main city junction without a permit, they're flirting with arcing and massive overload. That's not just a fine, man. That's criminal infrastructure tampering." That was the confirmation I didn't want, but deeply needed. The next morning, I drove straight to the Havenwood Trails HOA office. It was housed in a pristine brick building, all white trim and expensive landscaping. Inside, sitting behind a polished cherry desk, was Patricia Vance. Mid-50s, razor-sharp bob, wearing that perpetual, superior smirk. We'd clashed before, my slightly non-compliant yard shed, the time she complained my American flagpole was half an inch too high. But this was different. This was about safety. This was about power. "I need to know what construction was done behind my house," I stated, my voice firm. "There's an illegal trench connected directly to the utility corridor." Patricia didn't even look up from her tablet. She offered that practiced, patronizing smile. "Oh, Paul, any maintenance work performed was fully authorized, approved, and executed. Nothing to concern your little self about." She slid a glossy, brand-new pamphlet across the desk. "Havenwood Forward. Phase 2 Infrastructure Enhancements." It looked like it had been printed maybe an hour ago. "Show me the city permit number and the contractor's license," I challenged, leaning closer. Her smile thinned, and her eyes flickered. A subtle, vital hitch I caught instantly. "That information is internal, Mark. Proprietary. Proprietary doesn't cover municipal infrastructure," I countered, the fire rising in my chest. "I spent 20 years maintaining field grids. If you've touched a single city junction without clearance, that's not maintenance, Patricia. That's a felony. I suggest you go home," she hissed, her tone shifting from polite disdain to veiled threat. "The power's back. Don't escalate things." I left with a knot of pure adrenaline and fury. She said, "Escalate," like it was my choice. Sure enough, The power was back by noon, but the current was dirty. My coffee maker wouldn't cycle, the HVAC unit was clicking strangely, and when I tested the garage outlets, the current was surging well above safe limits. Then came the yellow envelope with the official HOA crest, a notice of violation. It claimed my unauthorized exterior wiring had contributed to the grid instability, giving me 10 days to resolve it or face daily fines of $150. They hurt my house, and now they were blaming and punishing me for their crime. That was the line. They were messing with the wrong ex-military dad. I spent the next morning meticulously testing every single outlet. The damage wasn't localized, it was systemic. Several outlets sparked, my old receiver was fried, and my house, once my fortress, felt suddenly vulnerable. The worst part? Leo's refrigerator had died overnight. The milk, the meat, everything spoiled. It was a tangible, expensive loss, but the emotional cost was heavier. I called the electric company. No authorized service on your block in months, the rep confirmed. No permits filed under your address or your HOAs. My hands started shaking because it meant Patricia and her board hadn't just landscaped or installed decorative lights. They had dug into federally protected utility lines, without skill, oversight, or clearance. I put together a full incident report, dropped it off at the HOA office, and made 3 copies. One for them, one for my lawyer, and one for me. I didn't wait the 7 to 10 business days. Within hours, my neighbors Tom and Alice messaged me. Random outages, fried microwaves, and guess what? They'd received the exact same yellow violation letter, using the same predatory language, citing the same fines. They were systematically blaming the victims for the damage they had clearly caused. It was cruel, unethical, and unbelievably dangerous. Tom's wife needed a CPAP machine. What if that had failed? That evening, I heard an engine outside, near the trail. A plain white van, unmarked. 2 guys in coveralls, cheap headlamps, amateur equipment, poking around the junction box. I filmed them on my phone. When I yelled, "Are you with the city?" they froze. "Just maintenance, sir." They wouldn't show a permit. That footage, that became my first hard piece of evidence. I sent it all to Darren. The video, the trench photos, the burn marks, the violation notice. His reply was immediate and damning. "Mark, this is big. That junction box is city level, possibly federal. Interfering with it, especially causing damage, is a major offense. Do not let this go." I wasn't going to. The next day, a handwritten note was taped to my front door. No stamp, no envelope. "Cease your inquiries, Mr. Dalton. You are escalating a situation you do not comprehend. Further interference will result in legal and financial repercussions." No signature, just fear. That didn't scare me. It just told me they were cornered. I began my documentation in earnest. I set up a time-lapse camera on the trench. I found payments in the publicly accessible HOA minutes going to Silver Path Services LLC, a company with no state license and an address linked to Victor Sterling, the HOA's current vice president. They weren't just stealing power, they were siphoning HOA funds, too. Then the final, crushing blow. Leo's ceiling fan, the one that sparked before, shorted out with a loud crack, puffing thick, acrid smoke into his room, tripping every breaker. I rushed upstairs, found Leo crying, the room reeking of burnt plastic. That was it. I snapped. I picked up the phone and called a number I hadn't used in a decade, the emergency line for the DOE's Grid Protection Division. I called my old contact, Agent Greg Miller. I wasn't bluffing anymore. I was ready to bring the full weight of the federal government down on Havenwood trails. I sent Greg everything. The video, the report from the systems engineer neighbor, Jeremy, who had figured out their data throttling scheme, the HOA violation letters, the threatening note, and the connection to Victor Sterling. Greg's reply was 3 words: "Keep documenting everything." I started knocking on doors. The HOA meeting was set for Tuesday night, in the overly decorated, echoing common room of the trailhead. Patricia and her board sat there like a self-appointed monarchy. I hadn't been to one in a year, but tonight, I wasn't there to listen. I brought a manila folder thick with everything: photos of the trench, repair invoices, the melted surge protectors, and Jeremy's grid load report, kept encrypted on a thumb drive in my pocket. As I took my seat, the whispers started. You could feel the tension, the curiosity, the fear. Patricia called the meeting to order, her voice as polished and grating as ever. Beside her sat Victor Sterling, the VP, looking smug and untouchable. "Before we begin," I said, standing slowly, holding the folder, "I'd like to address an emergency safety concern." Patricia blinked, annoyance quickly turning to cold rage. "Mr. Dalton, resident comments are at the end." I didn't sit. "What's the protocol when the board has actively tampered with the city's power grid, caused property damage, and endangered children?" I held up a photo of Leo's fried ceiling fan. That got their attention. Victor Sterling leaned forward. "If you have a complaint, file the proper form. We do not allow baseless." "There's no form for felony criminal misconduct, Victor." I interrupted, my voice sharp and loud enough to cut through the room. "You and your co-conspirators have compromised the electrical system behind over a dozen homes. You've falsified permits and issued fraudulent fines to cover it up. Silver Path Services doesn't even exist outside of a P.O. box linked to your brother's empty rental property." A gasp went through the room. Victor's face went from smug to sheet white. Patricia slammed the gavel down. "This is an outburst. Security will remove you." "Go ahead," I challenged, meeting her gaze. "Maybe the federal agents I spoke to this week would be interested in how your security operates, too." The air instantly changed. Total, dead silence. Patricia's jaw twitched. "You're making baseless accusations. The HOA is authorized to make adjustments." "By whom?" I pushed. "Your cousin's fake company?" I checked the state registry. Silver Path is a shell. You knowingly damaged federally tagged infrastructure. That's not just incompetence, Patricia. That's complicity. A quiet, frail man named Mr. Henderson, who'd lived here 40 years, stood up in the back. "My wife's oxygen concentrator failed the night the power went out. We called the emergency line, and no one ever called back." Another woman stood up. "They fined me $300 for replacing my burned-out surge protector, claiming it was an unauthorized modification." The chorus of frustration built, the board's illusion of control cracking under the weight of real grievances. Patricia shrieked, slamming the gavel. "This meeting is adjourned." I didn't move. Neither did the crowd. "You're destabilizing the community, Mr. Dalton," Victor sneered. "We'll file an injunction against you. If you interfere again, we'll involve law enforcement." "You already did," I said calmly, dropping the folder onto Patricia's pristine desk, pictures facing up. "They just don't work for you." I turned and walked out. Maria, Tom, Alice, and Jeremy followed me, standing silent but firm. Their presence was everything. That night, another yellow envelope was in my mailbox. A $500 fine for defamation and disruption of official proceedings. They were panicking. I forwarded the entire meeting audio and the new fine to Greg. 2 hours later, Greg called. "They crossed the line. We're moving." The next morning, I woke up to rain, a steady, cleansing sound. I was checking the scorched soil by the trench when Tom called, his voice tight. "Mark, check your lawn." A bright red flag had been staked in my grass. Attached was a laminated notice. "This residence is under review for ongoing violations. Residents are advised to refrain from engaging with the owner." They were trying to isolate me, make me a pariah. I just took the flag, snapped a photo, and burned it in a steel bucket. You don't intimidate a man trained to walk through war zones. It happened at 2:37 a.m. The smoke alarm blared, jolting me awake. Instinct took over. I shoved Leo out the front door and ran to the back. Red and orange sparks were arcing from the transformer near the fence. The illegal trench had collapsed, the wet soil soaking the makeshift, unprotected wiring. The system was frying itself. I doused the fire with an extinguisher containing it, but the whole block went black. After the fire trucks left, a black, unmarked SUV rolled up. Greg stepped out. I showed him the smoking, twisted cables, the blackened fuse panel, the collapsed trench. "We need to inspect the source," Greg said. I knew what that meant. Enforcement. By sunrise, 3 more black SUVs arrived, carrying federal agents from the DOE and the State Public Utility Commission. No sirens, just silent business. Patricia showed up in her silk blouse and pearls, looking furious. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped at Greg. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Miller, Department of Energy," Greg stated flatly. "We are executing an emergency seizure of unauthorized infrastructure believed to be in violation of federal electrical safety codes and consumer grid manipulation statutes." Victor Sterling arrived, trying to play it cool, a briefcase in hand. This is private property. You can't. And this is not a private system, Mr. Sterling. An inspector interrupted, holding up my file. You spliced into a public grid. Victor went mute. He looked at me, jaw clenched. You did this. No, I said, stepping forward. You did this. I just refused to stay quiet about it. That was the end. Within 20 minutes, Victor Sterling and the HOA's operations manager, David Cross, were placed in handcuffs. Gasps erupted from the crowd of neighbors who had gathered. The board's fortress of denial collapsed with the image of Victor being led away in a federal vehicle. Greg came back to me. We're locking the system down. Full audit underway. If this had continued another month, Mark, someone would have been killed. Patricia resigned shortly after. The city council, spearheaded by a tough deputy director named Eleanor Reyes, started a parallel investigation. The final audit was a bombshell. $130,000 in unaccounted HOA spending, at least 4 fraudulent contractor accounts, and 25 homes with their electrical load siphoned and diverted on purpose. This wasn't incompetence. It was organized criminal exploitation masked as community governance. The HOA was dissolved by a unanimous resident vote. I declined the offer to be the new president. Instead, I accepted the role of infrastructure safety liaison, a title I respected. I could walk the paths, check the lines, and ensure that what Victor and Patricia did could never be repeated. Leo started sleeping with the lights off again. To me, that was the ultimate victory. The lights came back on clean and steady. That night, I was on my porch when a group of neighbors, Maria, Tom, Alice, Jeremy, gathered on my lawn. They brought solar lanterns, stringing them along my porch in a quiet show of solidarity. You got your community back, Mark, Eleanor Reyes said later that night. And she was right. But here's the thing about power. When you see corruption, you realize the quietest connection, the seemingly smallest rule, is where the integrity of the whole system truly lies. And once that light, the light of truth, is turned on, it's hard to hide anything again. So, tell me, what's the one HOA rule or community conflict that made you realize the system was rigged? Let me know in the comments below, because we need to share these stories. Hit like if you believe the quiet voice always beats the loud bully, and subscribe for more deep dives into the real battles fought right here in the suburbs.